Welcome on this rainy day. It is my pleasure to welcome our graduate, Danae Davis. For those of you who haven't been to one of these before, we try at least once a year to bring back a law graduate who is doing something perhaps non-traditional with his or her legal training, and we call it, depending on whether they're retired or not, what I'm doing with my law degree, or what did you do with your law degree. And today it's our pleasure to welcome Danae Davis, who is a graduate of the class of 1980 at the law school.
Jenny and Dean Raymond asked me to do this. I jumped at the opportunity because, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I am very unabashedly proud of the fact that I never practiced law and in fact have had a wonderful career in my non-traditional way of really having fun and doing some really cool things and important things and learning a whole lot. And I say it that way because back in the day, and again, I am a 1980 graduate, and that would have been something someone might have portrayed as, oh, poor thing, couldn't get, a law job. And I used to hear from family members, did you waste your 3 years? I mean, why are you? So from there to what I have done, and I do believe I'm a walking poster child for how important the law degree is to helping us be who we want to be and do what we want to do. So because of that, and because I really have great fondness for Dean Raymond, I just said yeah. And so I'm glad to be here and really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about that. And hopefully some of you in the room have been considering or are planning on pursuing non-traditional routes that follow your passion, and I would certainly encourage that. So I did graduate in 1980, but I am actually almost a lifelong resident of Wisconsin. I moved to our family, I should say. First of all, let me start back real quickly. I'm the oldest of 3 and now 6 children that my mother had. So she was a teen mom, and she had 3 girls, and we lived in Chicago, so that's where I was born. Ultimately, we moved to Louisville, Kentucky, and then when she remarried, we ended up in Milwaukee. And so that's how I ended up in Milwaukee from high school on. I'm a graduate of Oshkosh, UW Oshkosh, with a degree in political science, and then I came straight into law school, and there you have it. So the first job out of law school was indeed a law title job. It was an attorney advisor for the federal government. The agency doesn't exist anymore. But so I think I don't want to get too far ahead of the questions. Take it away.
Well, tell us what brought you to law school. I mean, you said you came straight, so
right.
What were you thinking when you did that? And tell us a little bit about your time here, what you liked, what you didn't like, what stands out for you.
So I wanted to go to law school in high school. Have no reason based on family experience, meaning there were no members of my family or in my network that were lawyers or had any idea what it meant to go to law school. But I remember talking to one of my favorite teachers and trying to figure out we probably weren't using that language in high school, but what do you want to do when you grow up kind of thing. And he said, because it was a he, find out what you do well and pick that. And the thing I was pretty good at, I graduated 4th in my class, so academically I was okay. But the thing I did well then and now, and that's the theme of my entire career in life, is I'm pretty good at problem solving. For some reason, people love to tell me their stories, and they trust me, and so building relationships and so on. And somehow or another, I thought that's what lawyers did. They resolve things. They got solutions to problems. They fixed things. They made things happen. And so back in that long ago, I wanted to be a lawyer. You couldn't tell that, though, by the way I behaved in undergrad. So I really had a great old time in my first couple of years and almost forgot that you really have to remain successful academically if you're going to go to law school. And finally, by the time it dawned on me that fun needed to be postponed maybe, or at least dialed down a little bit, I had to work really, really, really hard the last 2 years, 2.5 as it were, at Oshkosh in order to be competitive to go to law school. And then the next decision I made was to only apply to one, and it was UW-Madison, and for some reason, I got in. I've been relatively confident about my academic skills. That first year challenge, and I don't know if any of you have experienced it, it certainly almost took me to my knees in terms of, wow, when you work really, really hard and you got X grade that you weren't real proud of, but once I got into the rhythm of it and got my self-esteem back, which was about second year. Then the rest was pretty groovy. But that first year was really a challenge as I remember it, and who can remember that far back, but I remember it. That's how deeply it affected me, that first year really kind of rocked me for, are you really made to do this, and will you be successful, having had successes and relative successes in my life. And so anyway, second year, it was also pivotal because at second year I realized I'm not going to practice law. I loved collective bargaining, labor relations, and I was really, based on some classes that I took with June Weisberger and Professor Jones and some others, I said, this is my niche, back to that problem solving, resolution, mediation, arbitration, that kind of stuff. So my very first job out of law school ended up matching that. But while in law school, I was an activist. I encouraged that. Although I did have a Professor Jones, which maybe some of you know who Professor Jones is. I remember he said to me, and because he really, really liked me, he had a strange way of showing it, but he said, if you're going to be a social activist, get the hell out of my law school. So, and the reason he said that believe it or not, that was a very loving comment. I know it doesn't sound like it, but it was, you need to complete and be successful at completing law school if you're going to be successful at fighting for causes and such. And it made a lot of sense to me, and I actually did sort of ramp down and be more focused on what things I really cared about and paid more attention to the end, that is graduating, than I may have been doing in that first year or two. Didn't give up the activism because I was born that way, raised that way. My parents were very involved in the civil rights movement, and so we were as well. But it's just that I needed to focus on how are you going to be in a position to be able to do the things that you want to do and influence the things that you want to influence if you don't graduate, if you don't make it through. So I was active in lots of things, and in the law school, from a law school perspective, I did lots of clerkships. I did the LAIP, Legal Assistance Inmates Project. I did the National Labor Relations Board clinical. I clerked for Justice Abrahamson when I was in law school, and I'm forgetting one or two, but it was important to me to apply what I was learning at the same time in order to have that experience be fun and enjoyable and meaningful and relevant. And that was important to me. It was important in high school, it was important in college, it's important in law school, it's important in life for me. So that was my law school experience. I was pretty active and had fun. I think I learned in the second year that, well, for me, the goal wasn't to have the best grades, or to be law review just to say that that's never been my personality. I love people who do, but that wasn't me. It took second year to finally have the confidence, though, that I was on a path that was going to be really pretty neat. I didn't know what that path was going to be, but I give the law school experience credit for that, because there was an atmosphere of, the sky's the limit, and figure it out and just keep taking advantage of things and talk to people and learn more and that kind of thing. And I felt that was pretty inspiring.
So you come to the end of law school, you're thinking about what's going to happen next. Tell us about your first job, what you liked, what you didn't like.
My first job was as an attorney advisor for that federal agency called Federal Service Impasses Panel, and it was a political appointee, which is kind of a theme in much of my early career. Professor Jones was on a panel that was appointed by the president, and they had a staff, and so he was able to get me an interview, and then I was able to get on his staff, and we did labor relations, we did hearing examiner work, resolving disputes between federal agencies and unions. I did that for 2 years, and that was in Washington, D.C. I loved Washington, D.C. Today, I'd tell you that's probably where I'm supposed to be if I'm not going to be in Wisconsin. And it was the time that I got to be independent and stand on my own as an adult and all of that kind of stuff. I learned an awful lot in that experience, not the least of which that I'm a pretty good writer, and that I, again, am honing in on those skills to resolve matters that people can't resolve between themselves. I got married, so I had to come home. So my now ex was also in law school with me. That's where we met. And he was working for the public defender's office here. So I came home. And my very next job had a really great title. I was the governor's legal counsel. Yeah. except that the governor is a lawyer himself, and there's an attorney general, and so, you know, it really wasn't like he was listening to me in terms of legal advice. But I did have the responsibility of all of the sort of legal apparatus around the governor's authority. So being in his cabinet, of course, made being an influential person an influencer. And again, keep in mind, I'm in my 20s at the time. And so from there, I went to the Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission as one of 3 commissioners appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate, first female, first African American, and youngest to ever be in that position, and therefore was the sort of leader of one of 3 leaders of the entire mediation team. Scary part about that, and this is true in just about everything I've ever done, while I have skills and experiences, in that instance, it is an example of hadn't done any of that. And yet, you know, being able to get over the, oh my God, me? And realize that, yep, I can do it. You don't get that much of a window between that time where you're like kind of afraid, what if I fail? And when you just have to push on in and lean on in and get it done. So I had a really good time in terms of the learning experience of what our role as mediators and arbitrators and how important that role is in the state of Wisconsin. We at the time had one of the best sort of infrastructure apparatus to support collective bargaining in the nation. We were ahead of the statute was in favor and all that kind of good stuff. So I really had a great time. Then politics took over, and my governor got defeated by the then Governor Thompson. And since by that time I'd understood politics, I negotiated my way back to Milwaukee, out of the position I was in and into Milwaukee, where I was the chief labor negotiator for the city of Milwaukee, 19 bargaining units. By this time, I definitely have the experience and know what I'm doing. And I headed the labor relations function ultimately, and so therefore I was a mayoral cabinet member. And then I became head of personnel for the city of Milwaukee, 92 employees reporting to me. Now by this time, I think I'm in my late 20s. So, yeah, so it was a really, really, really great experience for almost 8.5 years. And then corporate found me. So my message there is always be mindful of, there's people who are always watching you. And I got a call, therefore, saying, aren't you ready for a change? From someone who I had worked with on a committee, who at the time was staffing director for Kraft Foods in Illinois. And so I accepted the position as Director of Diversity Management, their first one, and commuted for 3.5 years to Glenview, Illinois, because at that time I had a child and a husband, and that was the best ride ever, because I was on corporate jets and doing all kinds of really neat things in my role. I had the ear of the CEO. I created the work-life balance management program that still exists at Kraft Foods in recognition of so many women who were making decisions to have a family and then being told they got to go back to the back of the line and start all over, and that's not really smart as an employer. And so we were able to do some really influential and impactful things in that role at Kraft Foods. And so and from there I ended up back in Milwaukee at Miller, because at that time we were co-owned by Philip Morris. And we were part of the Philip Morris family of companies, I should say. And so I ended up coming home, so to speak, in a similar role. And from there I came to Pearls, but we'll talk about that later.
Talk about some challenging moments at work, the biggest challenges you faced, how you handled those.
Challenges are, especially if you are not one who stands in status quo, and you're constantly trying to get things to be better, and you are destined to be impactful and make things happen, and really for the underdog and the little person, because that's what diversity is about. It's people who come to us and really, don't feel like they have a place or someone that will help them pursue their career opportunities, get out of the jam they're in or whatever. And everything isn't always about race, and everything isn't about discrimination, but for a lot of people it feels that way. One of my most difficult challenges was when I was in the role as head of Department of Employee Relations. Collective bargaining was under me, and at some point one of our union leaders decided to run against the mayor that I worked for, and we had a divided common council, And so this particular individual then got into a really nasty situation where there were allegations of sexual harassment and worse. His name was Greg Rotz, and he was head of the firefighters union. And I think all of y'all are too young to remember this, but it was pretty well widely known. Union leaders were paid by the city to be union leaders, which I would hope is very unique anywhere else. So he was actually my employee. So we spent 5 hours, me being grilled in front of this council, 5 hours straight, where half of them wanted me to fire him and the other half wanted to call me a political hack if I did. And so that, if you can imagine, anybody that's done debates or forensics, or this is worse than that. So eventually, as somehow or another, that skill set that I attained at law school helped me to actually have a win-win situation. I did not fire him. I did not step into the hole of this is a political decision that you are making, since I didn't make that decision. And to this day, Greg and I are respectful colleagues. So at the end of the day, I avoided a real mess just by being able to think on my feet and being tenacious and being somewhat smart, having that problem-solving mode instead of trying to walk into increasing or making a bigger problem. Another example I would say is when I was at Miller Brewing Company, again, we started as Philip Morris, and then at some point South Africa Breweries bought Miller, and that changed the culture totally from what it had been, benevolence. We could miss our goals all the time, and we did because we were a cash cow for Philip Morris, to one in which accountability is critical to the business model. It really shakes up an organization, and it really feels quite uncomfortable. I personally ran toward it because I love being accountable, and I love knowing the results of the work that you do and so on and so forth. But changing culture was part of my responsibility, and I had a boss who was not, let's just say he was not honest, and that became clear. So as you tighten up the screws, the more that not being honest becomes clear, and some of that stuff can roll downhill. But at some point, I ended up going out on a medical leave. And I have been very transparent, and because it's been healing for me to say and admit that I went on a leave at the blessings of my friends from South Africa Breweries. While I was gone, my boss was terminated. So that's kind of how that went. But coming to a realization of what's most important to you at a time that you're really feeling like it couldn't get any worse than the way I was feeling it was at that point was kind of refreshing. And it really allowed me to sort of divest myself of things that were not healthy, including some people, and sort of focus on what do I want to do going forward. Not just to be in a job that paid you an awful lot of money, and provided an awful lot of wonderful perks. Maybe that's not all there is to life. Maybe there's something that you're supposed to be doing that's much more meaningful, And so when I came back after 3 months, I was pretty much, and I was very clear with my boss, who at the time was general counsel, that I knew I didn't want the next level job, which would have been vice president. I was a director at the time. But rather, I really was looking forward to something else that was going to be more meaningful. At that time, I was serving on boards, including the Board of Regents for UW System, and thought I might want to go teach middle school, because I really felt passionate about youth and what wasn't working for them, particularly in our community in Milwaukee. And so I lost the paperwork on that, but I had reconnected with Colleen Fitzgerald, who founded Pearls for Teen Girls. And she was deciding to leave at the time that I wanted to work with youth, and the planets aligned, and I applied. And first time I applied for a job in 20 years, so that was really scary. But I ended up becoming the second executive director and now CEO of Pearls for Teen Girls, because I decided to follow a passion and a purpose and contribute to hopefully helping young, in this case girls, to aspire and achieve their goals and dreams through a lot of intervention and support and so on. So those are my examples of sort of the tough times in career and how we worked our way around it. And lessons learned. Lesson learned was, you never let go of your network. You can get as entrenched in something as you possibly can, but if you cut yourself off of all that provides your strength, you're probably going to regret that. And so, you can never, what that looks like in a practical way is being too busy. I'm trying, the rat on the wheel. It's just running and running and running. And I can never catch up. The in basket is overflowing and all of that kind of stuff. Oh my God, when am I gonna? And then you realize that, well, wait a minute, this isn't healthy. So what are you going to do differently? I think it's healthy to go through something like that, believe it or not. I think it's healthy to have such an experience that you have to be very reflective and redirect if that becomes necessary, and not be shy about it. Because I think that what I sense in some of our schools, where the number one thing is excellence and otherwise you're a failure, we don't teach young people how to succeed when they're failing out of a failure, and I think that's not healthy. So at the end of the day, that was probably the biggest lesson I learned, that all that stuff and especially when I was quote unquote at my lowest, actually put me in a place where I'm probably the healthiest I've ever been.
Share a little bit about what you do in your current organization, what some of the challenges are, what some of the triumphs are, and what gets you out of bed in the morning.
Oh, the girls do. Our organization, in case anybody has not gone onto the website, is Pearls for Teen Girls, is a nonprofit that was founded in 1993 by Colleen Fitzgerald to provide a supportive, safe space for girls to grow into who they want to be. Particularly, she was focused on inner city girls, and her first group was an African American middle school group at Jackie Robinson Middle School, and grew to the point where she had 6 groups, including a high school. And what the girls do in weekly programming is really focus on self-esteem building healthy relationships with others, their peers and adults, working on their academic success, believing the sky's the limit, so they learn about what the world is around them, inclusive of shadowing and some other things. And they also learn the importance of giving back through community service projects. They do this, and today we have 38 groups at 29 different partner sites. When I started, there were 6 at 3 in 2006. And what they do is set personal goals once a semester. They learn how to accomplish goals, and if you can imagine a 10-year-old setting a goal and the joy that she experiences when she accomplishes that goal, and then that is celebrated in what we call goal parties, so the girls get together at a place of their choice. A few years ago, they wanted to see the color purple in Chicago. We made that happen. This is free to the girls. Last year, we served 1,249 girls, and 99.5% of them did not get pregnant. Milwaukee used to be second in the nation in terms of teen birth rates. We're now out of the top 10, I believe, and in large part, Pearls has been a contributor to that, with the phenomenal results over the last 8 years of anywhere between 97 to 100% of our girls not getting pregnant. 95 to 100% of our seniors have graduated from high school on time. 91 to 100% of our seniors have been accepted to at least one college. So we went from a middle school organization to now having high school, and now we're doing alumni. So that at the end of the day, I know that if there are 16 college graduates, I know there's more than that, but that's what we can count right now. And we've hired some of them as our full-time employees, and one of them is on my board of directors and chairs a committee. So they are doing, their goals are primarily to be the very best people that they can be. Most of them want to be leaders in Milwaukee some way, somehow. They want to be contributors to a better life for themselves and their peers. And that's what I get up every morning joyful about doing, is leading that organization and putting the face on it out in the community, because there's so much negative media attention to what's going on in Milwaukee. We're number one on so many bad lists that it's kind of hard to find those gems of things that are working and positive. And I'm very proud to have led for 8 years now an organization that is one of those gems. I know that we've served thousands of girls in Milwaukee, and our goal is to ultimately get to a point where we will serve 10,000 girls on an annual basis. So that's our new strategy. It's a 5-phase process. I'm not kidding you. We are going to get there. So I've learned board relationships from the other side, and I've learned the importance of accountability and the importance of data, and in terms of being able to tell your story and prove that you're having the impact that you say that you're having. And I can do that with credibility, because over time, it started again in law school. It worked its way up to today. And I'm not blowing smoke up your skirt, Dean Raymond. I'm just letting you know that I give a lot of credit to that experience for solidifying in me that, we each can make a difference, and we don't have to wait, and we really can.
You do work that you're very passionate about. Can you keep doing that? Can you keep pushing this hard? Do you feel like is this the last job? Will there be another? What do you think is going to happen in terms of your trajectory from here?
I have stumbled into every opportunity that I've ever done. This is not a 5-year plan chip. I mean, it just never really works for me to, okay, what are your goals? And not so much. So I have been very fortunate to have had opportunities, just kind of come my way that have been really exciting. I do sense that the next move will be something that I will need to go after. And what I mean by that is I'm really interested in helping those who have means figure out how to spend those means. Instead of being on the side that's begging, to be on the other side that's giving, I guess is what I want to say. So whether that's a foundation or whether that's some kind of think tank that, that influences how resources are allocated for probably social causes, I would guess. I could see that. I'm going to need a little bit more freedom to, just do whatever I feel like doing, travel. Freedom means freedom and resources. But I bet I'm going to be doing something until the end. I just feel like I've got a lot to give, I think. I'm having so much fun right now, so I'm not eager to move on. I'm often tapped for this or that, and wouldn't you like to, can't we talk you into, and my answer is generally no. But I do see a life after Pearls that will likely have me hopefully helping steer resources as needed to causes that will really truly have an impact.
Imagine you're sitting where these students are sitting now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you wish somebody had told you that nobody did?
That there is no profile of a successful law student. And I remember in law school, until that second year, wondering if I was worthy. Is there, am I intense enough? Am I, wanting to do all of the things that look the part and be what what I viewed as the typical lawyer. They look like general practice. I don't know if anybody, do you still have GP?
We call it lawyering skills now, but it's the same program.
Okay, all right. And not having any interest in that, and does that mean that I'm not going to be a good lawyer? And it took me a long time to get to the point where the way I was probably the best that I could possibly have been, and that was good, not only good enough, but as it should be. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of anxiety that I remember experiencing myself, and I believe that law students do around, are they going to not just cut it academically, but are they the right one? Are they going to be who they really want to be? And I really think the most important thing I've learned now that I wish I'd known then, would cut out some of the anxiety, is that the most important thing is to be who you are. And the very best, I know this sounds so trite, and we tell this to the kids all the time, but it is really true. To be the very best person that you could possibly be, regardless of whether anybody's watching you or not. I think if I had anything, that would probably be.
If you'll join me in thanking Danae for her.